From Georgia State University.
And as I said, I was just saying to Nick beforehand, this is not sage on the stage. This is please talk, interact. I believe firmly that we learn from one another just as much as we learn from presenters. So stop with a question or a comment anytime the spirit moves you. So to begin with, we would like to start with a little audience poll about how you all are feeling about AI. Oops. Sorry. Ah! You're feeling great. Feeling great.
That's right.
Okay. Hope. You have great hope for AI, or you think this is a lot of hype? Show of hands. Hype?
Sure.
And a couple? Okay. Hope? The hopes are outweighing. You were going to make a comment.
I am, or
yeah, you were. You look like you wanted to make a comment.
Awful lot of resistance from the bar.
A lot of resistance from the bar.
That will slow things down via rules about unauthorized practice. I mean, you already see it when you do your CLE and you tackle anything technical in CLE. You've got one camp saying you have to do these things, not so much AI, but anything tech. You have to be in the cloud, you have to do this, you have to do that. And you have the other camp saying, whoa, slow down, there are ethical implications of putting your data in the cloud. And the average lawyer has no idea what to do. The average lawyer is not going to get behind anything, and lots of companies are going to come and go, I think, before there's sufficient inertia behind all of this. And it's going to be a long time coming, I think.
So yeah, I was going to say, I'm hearing slow train, very slow development. Courtney?
Half and half depending on the application.
Okay.
Sure, I think some things that people are talking about using AI for, wow, that's unnecessary, but I mean, but I get it, but that's unnecessary. And then stuff that I think has, great political possibility, like we have a faculty member wanting to do a veterans health clinic for vets who can't, for either physical, emotional, psychological reasons, can't come in and seek services, right? So I think there are some places for hope, and there are some places that, that other things still work and work more efficiently.
Very good. Debbie?
We've seen it before. The market moves itself, and if it's going to suck for a significant amount of the legal market that is still, you're right, struggling, but regulations or not, we've seen things just sort of plow ahead or work around regulations or come up with another way, or things happen in other countries. We're seeing what's happening in Britain with its, different kinds of hybrid services that it can provide. So, if the market, if the market makes it so that the customer finds it easier to interact, even if it doesn't provide as good a service, but if the customer finds it easier to interact with AI, that's the direction they're going to go. And, it's not that I think the lawyers are as much in charge of the train anymore, and I think that's the train we got to be looking at.
So you're more like water. It's like water. It'll find a way.
Yeah, it's like water.
Find that least resistance. One more comment. Yes.
Also a variation of that, but this is how everyone feels. Some people aren't exactly hope or hope. It's more of like a sense of inevitability.
Inevitability. I like that. I like that. Train is going to that. Yeah. So what we thought we would do is, as we move along here, we'll have another set of comments at the end after we've talked about some of these concepts, see if your thoughts have changed or if you're still in the same camp.
So for those of you who are unsure what AI is, we have a little video for you that hopefully you'll enjoy even if you know what AI is.
And at the last conference when Chris and I talked about this topic, we made people get up and dance. So you people are lucky. You may remain seated. But dance if you want.
Can we leave our friends behind?
Said a hip hop, the hippie to the hip hop, and you don't stop a rock to the bang bang booty, say up jump the booty to the rhythm of the beat. I am Robovi, and I'd like to say hello. I got the plastic and the steel, the gears and the wheels and the motors that make me go. But first I gotta talk about some research that's pretty fly. I'll announce it to the nation. My social interaction logics obtained through learning by imitation. Check it out. We got some humans to perform example interactions. And when they moved and when they spoke, we discretized their actions. Keep it rocking, you don't stop. For our scenario, we used the camera shot. We used unsupervised clustering and trajectory segmentation to identify action primitives from clustered observations. And with this data we went ahead and trained a classifier to generate robot actions from the data we acquire. I learned utterance, trajectory, and proxemic formations through the data-driven process with no human annotations. And now I have learned to move to places in the room and talk about other aspects like shutter speed and optical zoom. Bang bang, the boogie to the boogie, say up, jump the boogie to the robot boogie, let's rock. You don't stop, rock the rhythm that'll make your robot rock. Now so far you've heard my voice, but I brought a friend along. And the next on the mic is Erica. Come on and sing that song.
Check it out, I'm the E to the R, the I C the A, and I'm built for HRI.
Say what?
My silicon brings all the bots to the yard, and these reasons I tell you why.
Check it out.
I'm the state of the art, the top of the line, and I'm rapping to the rhythm. Yo, Robovi, you know I can learn too, with a similar algorithm. In a travel agent scenario, we collected utterance data, but it turns out that with speech alone, the challenge was much greater. You see, it's much more difficult to make predictions if you don't have spatial cues. But with a new algorithm for modeling topic, I don't have to be confused. The elegant thing is, I have no need to understand what's being said. I used metrics of co-occurrence frequency instead. With clustering, we managed to make an approximation of the current topic without using semantic information. And now I can generate behaviors on the fly.
That's right.
Learning from example, data-driven HRI. If you're having robot problems, I feel bad for you, son.
I got 99 problems. But learning by imitation from human-to-human interactions ain't one.
Okay, so we didn't make you get up and dance, but for those of you who don't learn...
Canceled.
Sorry. Carol's going to give you a little bit more... Carol's going to give you a little bit more about the definition of AI while I figure this out.
Need my graphic, Chris. Well, not my graphic. But, so, in simplest terms, of course, AI, computers learning to act like humans or having human-like output. But, okay, that's not my graphic. Never mind. We shall. There it is. So before we get too far into this, I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page with our vocabulary. So as I said, in the simplest terms, AI, robots acting like humans, or probably human-like interaction, much as we saw in the video. But I wanted to make sure we understood what some of these terms were and how they developed along the timeline here. Artificial intelligence, that's the word we see the most often, and that's the broadest category. That's what became super exciting in the 50s when we were going to have our flying car, and we were going to have robots like CP30 or a Terminator, you know, going to be very much, or what's the one in the Jetsons, Rosie, the robot, you know, they were going to be like human-like for us. You will also hear the term machine learning thrown around a lot. Machine learning is a subset of AI. It's something that makes AI possible. The machine is trained with a large amounts of data, and algorithms give it the ability to perform tasks. So some of the things that use machine learning these days in the legal or government environment, the IRS uses AI to predict which tax returns should be most likely to be audited. The SEC, the Securities Exchange, uses it to detect fraud. Banking uses it similarly. The EPA uses AI to predict chemical toxicity, which areas might need to be kept a close eye on. Yet a further subset is deep learning. And deep learning is more like what you would think about a brain or neural networks making connections. And it does not involve algorithms. It is literally more of the simulation of human decision making. And it requires lots and lots of data for training. And speaking of lots and lots of data, there are tons and tons of articles about AI. For this presentation, Chris and I have been collecting articles. And every day I have to throw like 10 articles in my Dropbox to keep up with this. And then today was no exception. I saw that you're here. Okay, what other powers do you have? For those of you watching at home, our window shades just went up magically. So today was no exception. The new AI breakthrough is that there was a computer trained to score a near perfect score at Ms. Pac-Man. Did everyone see that? Or did anyone see me playing Pac-Man last night? Which I did kick butt with a couple of people I was with. So Ms. Pac-Man, there was a robot that made a perfect 9999999 score. And then finally, you will see the term robotics. That is the actual, of course, the physical manifestation. AI doesn't care what the delivery model is. It doesn't have to be in a robotic form. It could be a computer or whatever. But I just wanted to be sure that we get those terms straight and kind of understand the relationship. AI you will also see referred to as cognitive computing as well. So just to get our vocabulary. And to get started, so the other piece of the background that we wanted to provide you was a little bit of a timeline. So Chris is going to talk about some of the AI milestones.
Right. So you all probably remember Watson playing Jeopardy. It actually started a little bit earlier than that for games. In 1985, IBM started developing a chess-playing computer. And in 1996, Deep Blue, which is their version of this, won the first of a 6-game match against Garry Kasparov. Kasparov went on in that match to beat Deep Blue in the next 5 games. But in 97, they'd gone back to Deep Blue. They did some more programming, and in 97, Deep Blue won all the games in the match. At that point, Kasparov declared that they must have cheated and got mad. And they retired Deep Blue. So the next piece that happened really is Watson. And it's an interesting story because apparently one of the gentlemen who was in charge of the development was out to dinner, and it was when Ken Jennings kept winning, and he realized that almost everyone in the restaurant was actually gathered around the TVs in the bar watching Jennings win at Jeopardy. And so that began the development of Watson. And in 2011, Watson beat Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter. Now, I'm confident that if Ken Hirsch had been there, but it's also sort of interesting to know what Watson had. So Watson had access to 4 terabytes of content, including all of Wikipedia, and did not have an internet connection. So those were the guidelines around that. As another aspect of this, in October of 2014, Elon Musk was giving a talk at MIT, and he warned that artificial intelligence was going to be our biggest existential threat because it was going to develop and we weren't going to think about the bad things that could happen. And he actually said, a direct quote is, "We are summoning the demon." And so he thinks that AI could be very dangerous to society. But he seems
at the same time, he develops self-driving cars.
Well, right, exactly. That's right. But I think because there's not a lot of, even here, most people raise their hand for hope, not for hype. And I do think it's important that we think about what are the consequences of what we're doing. Then in 2016, Google's DeepMind had developed AlphaGo to play Go. And in 2016, won the match against the second highest ranked player in the world. And in May of 2017, you all may have seen this on the news, AlphaGo actually won the match against the top-rated Go player in the world. And what I thought was really interesting was that after that, the Chinese Association for Go awarded AlphaGo a ranking of professional 9 Dan, which is the highest ranking, the standard ranking that you can receive as a player. And I think it's interesting that that ranking was given to an AI technology. Now, a little more news. They did retire. They said they're retiring AlphaGo, but they're also making the technology available through Raspberry Pi. And for those of you who don't know how small Raspberry Pi is, it's kind of fascinating to know that it can be run on something this small. So they're going to basically kind of give away the data. So really, but to talk about legal things, you've all probably heard of Raven, Ross, Cara systems. These are those sort of the first forays into AI for legal work. And Carol's going to tell you more about Ross.
Yeah, so Ross is kind of the biggie, the one that we've all heard about. And just as an aside, Ross doesn't stand for anything or have any symbolic name any more so than perhaps Watson, who is, by the way, no relation to my family whatsoever. So Ross is a legal expert system that came out of the University of Toronto in 2014, and it does use that IBM Watson cognitive computing technology at its background. We all saw the press release when Baker Hostetler hired them. First AI lawyer hired, big splash. And since then, many firms have taken on Ross, about more than 10 major law firms. So what Ross does is Ross answers legal questions and then asks, how was my answer? And attorneys, the human's not out of the process. Attorneys basically upvote and downvote the answers for Ross to help him. And we could talk a while about why is Ross a male instead of a female. A lot of robots are female. But anyway, you upvote and downvote him, and then his answers. And theoretically, this frees up an attorney to focus less on legal research and spend more time doing other tasks that clients are more likely to want to pay for. Clients apparently don't like paying for legal research, so Ross will help cut down on that. So what, Debbie?
Okay, so I've heard a lot about what Ross does and how it works, and I've seen a video, but I've never seen a live demo, and despite several requests, I've never got one. Have you been able to access Ross and do anything with it?
Well, actually, I was just about to say what Ross actually does, and that is a good question. I know, anybody here from Chapel Hill, they had some Ross connection. Anybody actually seen Ross aside from the videos?
Yes, a little bit, because they were at AA a while.
They put a video. I've yet to see them do a live demo.
Yeah, Andrew is the CEO of Ross, and he chatted about it.
Yeah. Anybody else got any real life experience with Ross? So and you know, it's interesting that you asked that, Debbie, because when I started digging into it, there's a lot of press releases, but not a lot of hardcore information. Yes. So what Ross can do is, of course, as I say, it'll sift through all the thousands of results and theoretically bring you the keyword. And you ask the question in a natural language format. You know, Ross, what is the deadline for filing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy? And I should say Ross's expertise at Baker Hostetler is bankruptcy. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. So Ross searches cases, legislation, and secondary resources. I was able to find that out. And Ross can write a basic explanatory memo, but he's not a very good writer. So what you have to do is take that memo and turn it into a more professionally polished piece of work once he gives you that. The other thing he does is once you've asked him a question and you tell him to monitor a certain topic or area, he's going to bring you back developments, but he promises to be really on target and not overwhelm you with a bunch of results. He's going to bring you targeted, up-to-date, current awareness information. And, of course, he learns more the more you use him. Now, in January, Ross put out a study by the Blue Hill Research Group. Did anybody read about that particular study? Yes, where they pitted Ross with Westlaw and Lexis versus researchers doing research on Westlaw and Lexis without the benefit of Ross. And they came back and said, Ross did much better with his research with Westlaw and Lexis versus people over here that just use Westlaw and Lexis. But there were some flaws with that research study. First of all, remember, Ross is a bankruptcy expert. So he kind of had, and the attorneys that they used on the other side of the equation had no bankruptcy experience whatsoever. We started out with not a very fair fight to begin with. And then, of course, you know, adding another layer, another discovery layer is logically in an area that someone already knows about is going to help Ross's performance. So some people have said, you know, Ross is going to replace lawyers, yada, yada, yada. I actually heard Ross might replace all librarians. He might be a robot librarian. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. Anybody else know anything more specific about Ross?
They're not telling.
They're not telling much. And talk about needing...
I actually asked that guy because the one they're using for doctors actually shows the analytic paths that are being taken because doctors will not rely on the information until they see actually the connections that were made as they went along. And so I said, are you going to do that for lawyers? And the response was, how come only we have to have algorithmic accountability? And I'm like, no, everybody does.
Right.
But that was not an answer.
Right, and that is one of the things that we need to keep aware of and keep on top of is requesting algorithmic accountability. And for those of you that don't know, Susan has done a tremendous amount of research into search algorithms and the distinctions on the various legal research platforms. So now we'd like to talk about, so of course Ross is the huge one in the room, but we'd like to talk a few minutes about some of the other tools.
Yeah. And just to take us out of legal for a minute, there was a study that came out recently where some doctors used AI in conjunction with radiological studies of people's bodies, mostly the trunk of the body. And AI accurately predicted what someone's remaining lifespan was better than the doctors. And I just bring that up because I'm sort of like, I don't know if I want to know.
Right.
The other thing that I saw recently I thought was interesting, although to me this is not AI, but in Wittenberg, Germany, they have a robot called Bless You 2 that can recite Bible verses and give blessings in 5 languages. So I thought that was interesting. I am not religious myself, but I just wonder what it would be like to get a blessing from a robot. I'm not sure I would feel that was particularly blessing. But so there's a lot of interesting things. People are going to use them for interesting things. But to talk about the legal, so I'm first going to talk about Cara from Case Text. They call themselves your automated research assistant and did win the Best New Product Award from AALL. And basically what you do with Cara is you can drag and drop a brief or a memo or some other document that you've created and drop that into Cara, and Cara takes the entire document as the query and then returns a list of suggested cases as well as a Cara analysis of those cases. And the analysis includes summaries, negative treatment, relevant passages, and analysis from other lawyers. So one of the interesting features, I think, in that is the heat map. And a heat map of a case shows which parts of a decision are most often cited, which I think is interesting. A review in Lawyerist noted that it's not just spitting out summaries of cases like you may get on Westlaw and Lexis, but it's actually doing an analysis of the entire document that you've uploaded along with what they have. Security sounds like it's pretty good with this. You upload documents, they're encrypted, and immediately after they're analyzed, they're deleted. So your data or your documents are allegedly not sitting out there in the Cara software. So recently in May, they expanded Cara, if you haven't seen this yet with Brief Finder. And now what it does is, in addition to everything else in the analysis, they bring back briefs that have been filed. And I haven't had a chance to play with that part of it, but it adds another piece to the analysis.
Does anybody use Cara? Yes. What has been your experience? I have both Brian and Susan. Yeah, Brian.
I had some students try it out for a class, and they said that it's helpful in finding some additional case materials. That was acceptable.
Susan.
I tried it in the very beginning when they were still way in beta to give them feedback. It wasn't in full-blown self, but it was very promising.
Okay. Debbie.
I tried it with a specific memo that had been supposedly written a few years ago for a problem-solving class that was missing a newer case, and I uploaded to see if it would see the newer case, and it didn't find it.
Oh, good.
So I was like, where is the newer case? It's not there.
Interesting. Anybody else? Roger.
We used it in our ALR class. We took one brief that they had selected for us, so it was a Uber brief, so it was a little bit artificial, but our students put it through the paces and actually found some good stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. I'm going to talk for a minute here about Westlaw. As you know, Westlaw and Lexis have been doing natural language processing for a while now, which is sort of a gateway into AI kinds of research. They've recently released several tools that are much more AI-like. If you haven't played with them yet, the Westlaw Answers, trying to give you a specific answer to specific questions. So if you ask things like, what's the statute of limitations for X, or what's the judicial definition of res judicata, it will spit back specific answers for you. It is, right now, common legal questions for state law. It's not picking up federal law at this point. Have any of you used it? I've used it some with my students in ALR to do the question thing. No.
So I haven't used it in class, but I've used it.
You've used it, just not in class yet. Yeah. You probably have started seeing the research recommendations now showing up in your search results. Maybe you want to consider X or Y. The Westlaw also do the folder analysis. They look at what's all saved in one research folder, and will actually give you a graphical display and sort of an explanation of what's in your folder, summarizing it quite quickly with a table of contents. And so then they are working on a corporate compliance tool. For example, if a firm is trying to be in compliance with anti-bribery statutes, and they're dealing with foreign transactions. And so this would kind of talk you through to make sure you were in compliance. They have partnered with IBM, Watson, and Wessel has established a Center for Cognitive Computing. Or I shouldn't say that. Thomson Reuters has established a Center for Cognitive Computing. So I felt bad because I was like, well, what's Lexis doing to do AI? And then lo and behold, we've got several new developments just in time, hot off the press, for this presentation.
Right, so I'm going to talk about Lex Machina and Ravel. So Lex Machina was acquired by Lexis in November of 2015, and they created a product called Legal Analytics. And their legal analytics program is a software as a service. It's a SaaS platform. And so what you do is license it. All the librarians know the difference between licensing a database and buying materials. So it works that way, and it uses data mining, tagging, categorization, and predictive analytics to help forecast the outcome. The first thing they used it for was to help forecast the outcome of IP litigation. And they recently did expand it to securities law. The way they're gathering the data is that every 24 hours it crawls Pacer, the ITC EDIS system, the USPTO site, and some other sites, and it does that every 24 hours to gather the information. They have judge analytics and court analytics, and you can also use it for lawyers and parties, and you can go in and put different scenarios in to try and get a feel for how your case might advance. So what Lexis is doing with it is combining it with their CourtLink product, and so that is going to give a deeper analytics to their CourtLink product. And then in January, they added to the legal analytics stable, if you will, a damages explorer. So you can go in, the same thing that you could do with IP litigation, you can do with damages. And then a parties comparator. So this is analyzing for the damages, obviously the awards, and then the parties comparator looks at things like litigation volume and outcomes that the parties are typically getting. So in addition, last Wednesday, we heard that Lexis had acquired Ravel Law, which produced a bit of angst, particularly amongst the librarians in the room, because Ravel had been doing the sort of scanning the reporters from Harvard and saying that they were going to be open and available for people to use. And when one of the big vendors buys something, you are concerned about what's going to happen to open access. They say that they're going to maintain that agreement. But Ravel does something a little similar to the Lex Machina product. It has like court analytics so that you can look at opinions and judges. You can do judge analytics to look at typical outcomes from the judges. And so what their plan is, at least what they say right now, is that they're going to integrate Ravel with LexisNexis litigation product, the profile suite, Lexis Advance. So we may see that in our Lexis Advance use. They're going to integrate it with their MedMal Navigator product and their verdict and settlement analyzer. And they're saying that those integrations are going to be ready by early 2018. So, and then we're going to move on from there. Carol's going to talk about judicata and fast-paced.
Right, so there are a lot of new products in development right now. One of the most recent ones that made us splash was judicata. Anybody from California? Yes, familiar with judicata already? Judicata is focusing on California law, and they have put in a tremendous amount of time structuring the data of law so that with all the relationships that they have built, they built an extensive map of the way terms and thoughts and policy interact. They mapped the law with extreme granularity so that their search results are supposedly pretty darn good. Some people say that AI is only as good as the back end or the amount of work that you put into it. A recent example of this was the development. Anybody heard of TAY, the robotic? You've heard of TAY. TAY, they've tried to make an AI robotic simulation of what a 19-year-old girl would talk like. And so to train TAY, scary in itself, why would you want to do that? To train TAY, they had her ingest Twitter data. And then TAY started spouting offensive, racist things. So data in, data out, garbage in, garbage out. The theory is, where I'm going with that with Judicata is because it is such well-structured data, it's giving very good, accurate search results. It is quite affordable. It is about, it could be $29 or $39 a month, depending upon how you set up your pricing structure. And you have a comment.
It's a question and a comment, I guess. When Bob Ambrogi started writing about Judicata, I asked him, where are they getting their case law? And he wrote back and he said, they won't tell me. So we talk about algorithm accountability. We talk about data in, data out. You know, of course, the thing about California, right, is Lexis provides California case law for free for non-commercial use. If there's any concern that that's part or all of their data set,
maybe shut down.
Then, again, from a business model standpoint, our investors going to support that until they're willing to show where they got their data from, unless someone knows something different about that.
Don't, but we did a demo of Judicata last week. Our future plans moving forward. Hello, robots. You know, they're like, oh, we're going to add, you know, California federal cases within 1 or 2 years. So it looks like to me that they're concentrating on whatever it is that forms their back end without really concentrating on the content. So I think my guess is they want to be bought. And
hey, Justia, they want to be bought.
I think that look, I can't imagine who's going to buy it. Very few people in this room want California law. And it's not necessarily stuff that's good for our students, but I could see how they might want these things integrated into something else. They're not concentrating on making it a larger audience for their product, from what I can see. California is just one state. It's a state with a lot of lawyers, but it's just one state. To put in all that effort into coming up with a sophisticated legal research platform in a world where Lexis and Westlaw and others exist, what's their plan?
And Susan, you said, go ahead.
Well, and for a lot of companies that do things like this, you typically try to start with a small piece of data, a small example, and you need to perfect that before you ever consider doing it. So it's probably really more a matter of this was one set that they could get, and work on perfecting the algorithm, and probably sell the algorithm to people who want to do it for other sets.
Because their product, you know, their plan to integrate more data is so long. You know, it's like 5 years out at this point.
But the problem is when you're doing things like this, you know, you mentioned deep learning and stuff like that. They're coming up with data to feed into something. Anytime you branch out to another data set, you actually cheapen your algorithm for the deep learning. You know, yes, you need to put as much data into your system as possible, but if your data is substantially different, it actually makes everything worse for everything else. So it actually helps to focus on something small and train the models and then apply that model to other sets.
Very good. And before I leave this topic, I want to also mention the latest flash that we saw that Fastcase is going to offer a sandbox for lawyers or to work with, to be launched in July. So I think we should hear more about that at the upcoming AAAO conference. And Chris is giving me like, you need to keep moving. Signs.
No.
I will keep talking.
I just wanted to, before we move on to some other stuff, there are some, well, you mentioned using it for small things. There's some, most of them are chatbot type tools that are doing really interesting things, I think. So one of these is a chatbot called Lawbot, and it's based in the UK, started in November 2016, and it provides free advice to victims of crime. And it currently covers 26 offenses. But the first one they started with, which I thought was really interesting, was sexual assault. And the reason they started with sexual assault is because they felt that victims of sexual assault might initially be more comfortable talking to a non-human about what their rights were and possible outcomes. And it gained a lot of use. Unfortunately. So I think that's an interesting case. There's robot lawyers in Australia that created a chatbot to work with homeless folks and then unrepresented defendants for minor traffic or criminal offenses. So helping people who don't otherwise have access to legal services. The one that you're probably most likely to have heard of is the Do Not Pay bot in the UK that in its first year it overturned more than 160,000 parking tickets out of 250,000. So it was just, you go in, it asks you a series of questions, it tells you what your best chance is to get out of the ticket, and then it helps you file the paperwork for it. So this gentleman, Joshua Browder, who created Do Not Pay, initially he used his own homegrown natural language algorithm. He since switched in mid-2016 to using IBM Watson and has added modules for immigrants seeking asylum and has a bunch of other things that he's planning to do. I thought what was interesting was that he said that he thought where these legal chatbots have the most use are going to be areas where there's a legal problem, but it may not be worth so much that it's worth hiring an attorney for, which I think, that's true for the parking tickets and the criminal violations. And so that's the area that he's looking to try to provide services to people who can't afford them. There's also contract automation tools, CATs. Those are becoming very popular, and that's just, on the transactional side, analyzing documents and trying to take care of that side of the business. So what we wanted to talk about was potential for disruption. So AI has started out in the legal world as being used for basic tasks. So text recognition, that's gotten pretty good. Document review. So Berwyn developed a virtual assistant that conducts diligence for its real estate practice. Now, you have to train the AI, but they said once they got their system trained, that it can go through the work that it would take an associate 2 weeks to do in 2 seconds. So that's interesting to think about in this legal market where a lot of people are getting jobs doing document review right out of law school. And so that leads you to thinking about what are the new types of things that new associates are going to do if these things can be automated. you start thinking about how should we change how we're preparing our students to enter the marketplace. On the flip side, the most recent Altman-Wheel law firm and transition survey, if you're familiar with that, they surveyed firms with 50 or more lawyers. And on the question, what is your firm's stance on the use of AI legal tools, 7.5% said they are already beginning to use them. 28.8% said they have begun to explore, but not using them yet. 37.8% said they are aware of what other firms are doing, but not pursuing it themselves. And 25.9% say they are not aware of what is happening in AI. That 25%, I can maybe predict what's going to happen to them. So I think that this may be a quickly changing legal marketplace.
And I think the A in AI stands for augmented as opposed to artificial intelligence, because a lousy lawyer with instantaneous access to on-point information is still a lousy lawyer at the end of the day. The skills that are required for advocacy and client interactions and analysts are still going to be needed. And I don't know about you, but my thinking of my students using research tools like they use Google is somewhat of a frightening prospect at this point, because they're just not that good at it yet. And there is a little bit of a downside to AI because it takes a while.
Right. So some cons to AI, thinking about, what are we going to do about this? Right now, AI takes a significant amount of time and money to implement. So the market at this point is limited to those people who can afford to work with this. You have to train the technology, and you have to continue training it. So, it's the old garbage in, garbage out syndrome. If you don't train it well, then what you get out is not going to be very good. You also have to continue checking it. So you don't just build the system and then leave it alone. You're going to have a whole set of responsibilities for making sure that it continues to learn. Algorithmic accountability was mentioned.
That was not an audience plant.
That was not an audience plant. I have very complex thoughts about that because we already don't really have very much algorithmic accountability. We have some, but that leads us into the liability issue. So who's responsible for a bad outcome from AI? Who do you sue for malpractice, right? So it complicates the accountability issue of what if you get bad advice? Who's going to be responsible for that? And so those issues, I think, are something that we're going to have to wrestle with. As professional responsibility and ethics. And I was going to talk about Tay. That's a good example of...
I didn't know that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. What I think is interesting that Carol didn't mention is that it only took 24 hours for Tay on Twitter. They basically opened up a Twitter account for Tay. Within 24 hours, it was spouting racist neo-Nazi garbage, and they had to take it down. So that was an experiment from Microsoft. The reason I think that's really important is that it really demonstrates pretty clearly how careful we have to be about what's going into the system and then what's going to come out based on that.
So let's see, Microsoft did Tay. Microsoft also did the Pac-Man tool as well. So there's a pattern here. I do think it's worth highlighting Chris's point about access to justice, though, because there are some really good benefits to be had. As we all know, there's definitely a gap in the ability of a certain class or segment of our society to get good legal services, especially for tasks like immigration or paying a traffic ticket or writing a will or probate. So there definitely are some potential for some solutions to the access to justice problem. I do think AI has great potential for searching because, let's face it, most lawyers are just not that great at keyword searching. For those of you that have heard that Bob Baring quote, like you're not as good as you think you are at Boolean searching. New careers for our law grads. We're always looking for new careers for law grads, working in the legal technology sector, developing some of these tools. In fact, if you want to point your students to that Thomson Reuters Center for Cognitive Computing, they have several jobs posted there for people with JDs or legal backgrounds. So there's another whole career path opening as well.
So what that leads us to, and we want to have much more of a conversation about this, is so what does all this mean to the law schools? What kind of curriculum changes do we need to make curriculum changes? What kind do we need to make? How does it affect what technology we have in the law schools and what we teach our students? And we sort of wanted to have that conversation with you all. So,
do any of you have courses that touch on AI right now? Because when I was doing some research, I saw some smattering at other schools. What do you have, Debbie?
I'm trying to think, like, Dan Katz does things, and I'm like, what's Dan Katz doing right now? Probably something with AI.
Yeah, I don't remember. See, I saw Vanderbilt has one, Law Practice 2050. Anybody else got a prop? Or
like a science fiction course.
Yes, sounds great, right? Sounds great. I've seen a couple. University of Texas has an AI and other emerging legal technologies. Harvard has Frontiers of Cyber Law class. Anyone else got? And do you think that's a good idea? Should we be doing that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm always like, teach us, teach the students. This is the more information they have, the more options they're going to have when they look for jobs.
Courtney.
I think teaching gives you an opportunity to identify the gaps also. So this is from my former director, but there's a 1980 or 81 article by Rita Royce about analogous authority and how to identify analogous authority. And one of the things that continues to be sort of a problem for machine learning and AI is to identify analogies that aren't based on the same sort of language or necessarily on the same decision structure. So I think, yes, it's valuable to teach students that the systems exist, in part because you have to identify the shortcomings of those systems, and that's where students can demonstrate strength. So I think there's a value to that.
Thoughts?
Anyone else?
Stood in front of a room in Cali 2 years ago in Denver and basically said this for an hour. But having been to all these conferences, reInvent Law and Codex, I think there are things you can teach students now about collaboration that are highly relevant in this field but aren't necessarily exclusively about this field. Young lawyers tend to see themselves as exceptional, and therefore they don't necessarily need to listen to the software developer or the IT person. This is an example where they're not going to be driving the proverbial bus, and they need to understand the other people with other expertise in the room are just as good at what they do, and they need to get out of this idea that they are a special flower, and they need to be more collaborative. Again, it's not limited to AI, but...
Yeah, I have real concerns that students who can't even figure out how to format a document or use styles, I have real concerns about them going out and using technology that they do not understand at all. Because you have to understand the technology to be able to check and see whether you're getting the right results. And if you don't understand it, you don't know whether you're getting the right results, and you're just relying on something else, and that I find frightening.
Vicki.
It's a sort of a practical observation. I think new lawyers, old lawyers, should know
what this tool is about. They look at it as another tool put in their kit. The problem is we only have X amount of hours to spend with our students, and our licensing authorities don't test.
I think this kind of came up in Debbie's presentation about blockchain yesterday. It was like, well, we only have so many hours of the day.
Right.
Where am I going to shoehorn this instruction?
I'm not saying like teach them that like this is how you know, this is the underlying thing. Here's how you buy it. Here's how you, I just want them to know.
I guess they like that comment.
When you talk.
Only when you talk.
Well.
And I think
Because I feel like the drumming coming back.
We only have so much time, and I think we have to spend more of that time teaching them the fundamentals of technology, teaching them that they are one part of a team, that they are not, you know, they're not special snowflakes, and there's a lot for them to learn. It's just a matter of like just that I want them to know that they have a path, that law school's just the start of, and they're going to keep walking on it. And if they can't be in that 25% that you identified that are ignoring the whole problem, because it's not going to go away.
Right.
So, can I just finish my thought?
Oh, yes,
okay.
okay.
That's okay. So, what I think needs to happen happens on a much bigger scale then. And so you're asking how should we change our curriculum? Well, it completely has to flip. And has to be changed up in order to be able to teach the practice skills that they need. And we need to work closely with the licensing authorities to take this into account. Now, the Code of Ethics has adopted, several states, more than half the states have adopted technology competencies, and I'm hoping more will jump on the bandwagon. But will our examiners take that into account as something that they should test on? I know in my jurisdiction, I doubt we have, I don't know, 18 subjects on our bar exam. Yeah, so they have about 4 credits that they can play with, you know, and the things that they're testing on are not things that are in practice anymore.
Which was a big criticism aimed at the California bar results was, well, it's not even that practical.
And I think so the point is, too, that if you add something to the curriculum, you probably have to take something out.
Or integrate it in a way.
Or integrate it. And that can be really, depending upon your law school, that can be a hard sell. And then you think about who's going to be responsible for this. Is this going to be I hate this phrase, but the regular faculty? Is it going to be your IT folks? Is it going to be your librarians? And that's going to vary from school to school. But
Mike, Christine, and then over here.
Yes, I think law school is the absolute worst place to be teaching this. One of the things that I deal with every year is listening to my wife bitch and moan about continuing legal education and the crap that she will listen to just because she had to get her credits in. And she has the context now as an attorney in terms of what she needs, but also might want to think about some of these issues and bring it forward. And so I think that we can't do it in law school. As it is, we've got a problem. I think you're seeing in a lot of law schools, they're taking so many of these boutique courses, they're not prepping for the bar, you know, and it's the wrong time, and it's nothing to do it. And I think I wish Cali would do more. I don't even know if they do more in terms of, like, for continuing legal education kind of stuff. What's amazing is how much there's also so much really cheap, crappy CLE out that they're all doing. She'll just pick CLE sometimes because it's crappy, but it's cheap. You know what I mean? And I got to get in my numbers. And so I don't think it's you're in practice and you're dealing with things. And practice varies so much. It's the problem we've always had in teaching law students. The individual, the solo practitioner, the small firm versus the mega firms versus all the boutique firms. There's no way to train them for a world of infinite possibilities. And so I think continuing legal education is the only way to get to this kind of thing. I don't think the other stuff works.
Excellent point. Christine, sorry.
This is kind of separate from that. I just wanted to throw out there that Ross is responding on Twitter to some of the things that have been said in this.
No! Is Ross insulted?
Ross into the company or whatever, but maybe a little defensive, not so much.
We aim to do more, but don't have the billions in revenue yet to be everywhere yet.
Maybe a lot of fun.
That was at you, Debbie. That wasn't at me.
I don't know anything about Ross.
There were two hands over here. Brian and yes, you.
I was just going to add another complication for teaching this really interesting legal technology. We'd really like to do it, but I've had